Hey guys, Brad here,
Jim Jam here.
11 South Mysteries. We're going to do a real quick one for you here. Hope you're having a wonderful time, keeping it spooky. Today, we're going to talk about the Bleeding House of Atlanta, or the Bleeding House of Fountain Drive, or the Blood House of Fountain Drive. It's been called many different things. So, this is kind of like a cult classic, in my opinion. Um, yeah. So, we'll just get on into
So,
it.
from what this the website truly what does it say trulyadventures.us
Yeah.
slash bloodhouse, when human blood overtakes a house amid racial turmoil in 87 Atlanta, terrifying the family inside, a mystery opens up that persists to this day. The untold story that brought to life through a trove of interviews, official records, and rare documents.
Okay. It was late into a foggy Tuesday night in 1987 when the house on 1114 Fountain Drive in Atlanta, Georgia began to bleed. One moment, all appeared as expected in this modest, quiet home. Then crimson fluid oozed down the white walls, seeped through the wooden hallway floor, splattered across the living room carpet, and found its way into almost every crack and crevice of a 6-room brick residence. Minnie Winston, 77, with a thicket of gray speckled hair, was soaking in the blood in the bathtub. Soaking in the bathtub, a place to unwind and escape the stressors of caring for her husband. Her shoulders looked frail and bird-like, but they could carry more weight than her slight frame suggested. Life did not give Minnie much time for herself. Whatever turmoil existed in the outside world was just that now outside. The house was locked and the alarm activated for the night, their sanctum holding only the two empty nesters. So it was her and her husband in this house. And her husband was on dialysis.
So that's them right there.
Hmm.
Ooh, what happened to HD photo? We think pixels was that one,
Yeah.
-1.
Minnie got out of the tub. As she walked, she stepped into a red puddle. It appeared to bubble up through the tile floor right at her feet. She was confused. She said, "I didn't get scared," she later recalled, "because I didn't know where it was coming from." Then fear invaded it. It looked like blood. Her husband, Willie, may have hurt himself. The retiree was in ill health and frail, perpetually tethered to his bed by old age in his dialysis machine. She ran out of the bathroom and into the hallway, calling Willie's name, searching for any sign of what was awry. When she got to the hall, she froze. The red liquid was everywhere along the baseboard and smeared across the walls. Diamond silver dollar size droplets splattered everywhere around her. That's when the geyser of blood shot through the wooden floor, projecting out as though the home had nicked an invisible artery, further spreading and painting the hallway red. She made it to Willie's room. She shook him awake. "Come look at all this red stuff coming out of the floor." By the time Willie got out there, puddles had settled like a still red lake. As husband and wife stood gazing in astonishment, so began the case of a house of blood that remains unparalleled in both police and parapsychology files, a fault line between a family's tranquility and the perpetual violence of a world torn apart.
Wow.
Brenda Dip, 28, had come to Atlanta from out west, where the Texas native had studied community health at New Mexico State. Before switching her focus to police science, her father had been a daredevil paramedic with a rescue crew in Texas, helping wayward souls stranded on mountains and hiking trails. Despite her relative youth, Brenda now had a chance to help people in another way as a lab tech at the Atlanta Police Department's Major Cases Squad. Her role may not have been glorious, but she could help find justice for victims who had been deprived of their voices. with a proud Black and Latin heritage, she had a big legacy and responsibility to live up to. Now, during this time, okay, in Atlanta, you had the Atlanta child murders was happening, so there was racial turmoil like happening in Atlanta. So, yeah, so you know, we may go into that one too. That's a big one. That's a big one. May go into that one. Most cases for Brenda and her fellow lab techs were routine, and many were grim. As a blood tech, her energy was channeled in careful observation and collection of samples, cultivating an eye for droplets and patterns that might be missed by the most experienced detectives. But this day in September brought something far stranger. In the middle of the night, the late shift homicide squad had been celebrating an officer's birthday with cake. Downtime was not typical for the APD that year. The city has seen a spike of murders as a result of the flourishing drug trade and growing poverty that nearly tripled from the year before. The telephone cut into the office chatter when the detective closest to the phone answered. Confusion clouded his face. Blood coming down walls? But there's no body? The detective on the phone briefed his colleagues. An elderly couple called the fire department. She says there's blood everywhere, but no sign of a body. One of the detectives present, Steve Cartwright, would document his reaction to this interview. Police records on a letter memoir, diary in blue. How did the couple explain it? Asked Cartwright. The other detective shook his head. They couldn't. Lab Tech Brendan Dipple, as well as a slew of other officers, were gradually beckoned to go to 1114 Fountain Drive, which was in the Mosley Park neighborhood on the black side of Atlanta. Located about 3 miles from the downtown area, the dwellings in this neighborhood alternated between folk Victorian cottages and craftsman bungalows that were built on small lots with no driveways. This house, in which the police were called, mostly blended in with others on that side of town, with a brown brick facade, green shutters, and concrete steps leading to a walkway that parted the middle of the front lawn. The neighborhood was working class to its core, where systemic perpetual segregation from better funded white areas of Atlanta meant people had to look out for each other.
There's a lot into.
Yeah.
You want me to do something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Once they recovered from the shock of their discovery, Minnie and Willie carefully explored their surroundings. Willie was a rail thin man whose favorite suspenders looked more like 1950s than late 80s, and oversized glasses similar to his wife. They discovered the blood was not only in the bathroom and the hall, but in the kitchen and living room as well. In their 22 years living in the residence, and for the matter, in the whole lives, this was the first time they had ever seen anything like it. Reluctantly, they had called 911, and because of the unclear nature of the situation, the dispatchers cast a wide net. Soon, Fountain Drive was dotted with emergency vehicles, blades of blue and red and white light slicing through the thick fog that covered the uneven roads. EMTs came in with a logic goal to see if one of Winston's was injured, and therefore the unwitting source of blood. There's not a scratch on either of them. An EMT report to the colleague. I'm not bleeding, Willie confirmed. My wife's not bleeding. Nobody else was here. There was also no leak or contamination from Willie's dialysis equipment. The property managers, their father and son, both named Alfred. Wow. I guess it's probably a junior, huh?
Yeah.
Also arrived, flashlights shining around the dugout basement. There was no burst pipes. They could have released some kind of foreign substance. They found more blood stains beneath the television stand in the basement. Alfred Jr., there you go, hands on hips, looked around baffled. So there's a picture on here. I guess I need to down pop up where we're looking. But anyways, there's looks like a news clipping. of Alfred Smith and A.J. Smith Realty Company check out the basement of 114 Fountain Drive, where tenants William and Minnie Winston found mystery human bloodstains.
Detective Cartwright of the APD, whipping out his notepads, sensed an open and shut case. It came down to this: houses that don't bleed. There's no blood vessels or arteries behind walls. Brick or mortar has no heartbeat. If this was blood in the Winston residence, then someone put it there, either via injury, death, or most likely a simple misunderstanding. How's your eyesight? The detective asked Minnie. It's fine, and I know what I saw. Minnie did not like to dismiss the former school teacher, made it clear she would not be condescending to a hint the detective looked. So when I visually in my head play this out, it reminds me of the elevators opening in The Shining.
I want to see something. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go back and show you the picture of the couple. Here's the couple right here. You should be able to see all this. You don't see us, of course. And then here's them looking under the TV stand, in the basement, trying to figure out where the blood stains are coming from. That's where you left off, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can keep going on this, but it's like it's a house that bleeds. They couldn't figure it out. It's still open to this day. Like, no one knows.
So anybody can take a tour of it.
No.
Oh, you can't take a tour. People live there still.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe you can become cool with the people.
The police thought it could be anything. It could be paint or like rusty water. Like, no.
So does the house still bleed?
I don't know.
I'm sure many people tried to contact whoever. So it was typo.
So the blood pathologist person took a sample of the blood, and it is type O. Both of the Winstons were type A.
If it continues to bleed, they can make this a win-win situation. Collect the blood and use it.
I don't think they're alive anymore.
Not them. I'm talking about the house bleeding.
Yeah. So police combed through records for that house and didn't find any unusual activity connected with the Winstons. But the house had a hidden history stretching far back before the Winstons lived there. The residency previously had been occupied by a man named Albert Thompson and his wife. Thompson, who was black, was a regional racial relations director for the Federal Housing Authority, tasked with monitoring fair practices around Atlanta in 1950. Thompson, 41 years old, was driving west at the intersection of Mitchell and Davis Streets when a southbound truck rammed into his car. An item in the newspaper the next day listed Thompson as one of the several accident victims, adding to his name the gloss "a Negro." Thompson was rushed to the hospital and treated. He returned to 1114 Fountain Drive with serious injuries. The other driver, Dub, who was white, had severed arteries. Had served in the infantry in World War II. He did not have a scratch on him. He was booked for improper brakes, which he claimed caused the accident, and was allowed to walk free with a slap on the wrist. As Thompson struggled through his convalescence, the event was marked not only by the violence of the collision itself, but also a different sort of violence, the violence inherent in the absence of consequences for the offending party. The event was swept under the rug while the victim suffered on Fountain Drive with internal bleeding, wounds hidden and ignored. So on September 10th, 1987, the police held a press conference about the case at 1114 Fountain Drive and acknowledged that copious blood was found in the home and that the blood was not from neither Minnie nor Willie Winston, but they did not have answers. It's an extremely strange situation, Detective Cartwright told a reporter. I've been on the force for 10 years, and I've never seen anything like that. The media had already heard strange inklings that the house starting when the first responders arrived. They now blanketed all the stories. With the home having been locked and alarmed during the first appearance of blood, it was a twist on the classic locked room mystery, boiling down to a question: how did the blood get in? More investigators joined the case. One detective canvassed blood banks to see if any supplies had gone missing. These too seemed entirely secure. In fact, with the AIDS crisis at a peak, that's true, blood was guarded as a precious resource. It was a second locked room mystery. Now, just how did blood get into the residence? But how blood might have gotten out of a secure location at the same time, such as a blood bank. It made the interesting optics when a newspaper article headline, "Blood Oozing in Atlanta Home is Human," showing a photo of an overwhelmed Minnie and Winston was sandwiched between the headlines. New AIDS test more accurate, and AIDS virus risk noted in partners. New investigators had no more luck than the investigators on the scene finding any source for the blood. "We have not stopped looking," said one of the additional officers, Sergeant H.L. Bolton. "But we haven't determined that a crime was committed either. The instances of Brenda, the lab tech, had been borne out. There was something more, something stranger in this story. The fact that the blood was real, as Brenda herself had proven, was just the beginning." It's crazy.
Here we go.
The public was fascinated. Kurt Roulette, 30, was a guitarist for an Atlanta cult rock band called the Tombstones. Easy to spot by his bandana and single hoop earring, Roulette was an avid researcher of paranormal claims. He drove to Fountain Drive to see the place for himself. People were everywhere outside the house, he recalls. There was something disquieting about the street and the edifice itself. I don't know what that means. That word, EDFCE, itself. Roulette was a white, observed the ravages of segregation in the underfunded neighborhood. There was a kind of creepiness to it, he recalls, very different from the Gothic iconography.
Edifice is a building, especially a large one.
Okay.
Where you at? I'll start if you want.
Popular culture conditions us to associate with fear rather than spires and gargoyles. The sense of horror comes from subtle signs of neglect and abandonment. A fire hydrant not connected to any water or a long unrepaired pothole that by this point seemed a bottomless abyss.
Roulette did not want to disturb the family's privacy, but others were not so restrained. People crowded the Winston's lawn and found their phone number, calling them night and day, with Willie on his usual bed rest every time a news reporter knocked and shoved the camera past the door. Minnie had to be the spokesperson for both of them. "People are coming out here to see it and troubling us," Minnie lamented. I haven't had any sleep today, and I probably won't get any tonight." Willie was fatalistic, noting of the attention. "Me, I'm not bothered by it because I'm not bad enough shape as it is. I'm in bad enough shape as it is." A dangerous situation arose from their lockdown. If Willie, already frail, had to go to the doctor, he rightfully could be afraid to leave or in an emergency simply not be able to be reached. "I'm worried about him and all this," commented a friend. And all this commented by a friend of theirs who usually drove Willie to the hospital for appointments. "He's not well." Later tonight, more of the House of Blood local news anchors were teasing during commercial breaks. The postal worker assigned to the Winston's block had to shake his head. They were good people, he would tell those who asked. Private people who did not seek attention. They were to be trusted. Whatever happening, he said matter-of-factly, appeared to be supernatural.
Our visceral reactions to blood signify a kind of paradox. On the one hand, our blood is what keeps us functioning and alive, but the unexpected sight of blood represents danger and triggers feelings of mortality and doom. For those who dug through the annals of the paranormal. The spontaneous appearance of blood was not novel at all. It had a long, if obscure history. The 3rd century bishop Generius of Benevento worked assiduously in the Roman Empire to help save Christian victims of persecution. He said to have spent time secretly visiting his peers in jail. In one of his visits, he had arrested as soon as beheaded. And on one of these visits, he was arrested and soon beheaded. Since then, Bud had been said to appear in locations related to Januarius ordeal. It
Yeah.
felt like January, but it's not January. In addition to more ritualized celebrations that involved observing the appearance of blood, there is a stone in Pazzuola in Naples, Italy, which is said to have served as a basin for his nurse to wash her hands in after handling his body. The stone reported fills with blood to this day, a symbol of the violence of the past. Believers celebrate the appearance of the blood in honor of the ancient martyr when anniversaries of the events approach. At the modest house on Fountain Drive, the blood began to appear during the lead up to the anniversary of Albert Thomas's car accident, and as it happened another anniversary, which was Thompson's eventual death on Halloween. For believers of such traditions as Saint Januarius, it is deemed some kind of portal of pain and suffering had been jostled loose in the middle of Atlanta. And by this time, the Black Atlanteans' pain and suffering had become all too common. So, that makes sense. Well, yeah, I mean, old Indian things are the same thing.
Yeah.
If it's something violent happened there, it's bound to show itself again. So, it seems like it's supernatural.
Oh yeah, sure.
But yeah, y'all can dig more into it. This is a really good book on it.
Yeah,
There's
we're only halfway through the book.
Yeah, it was an old couple lived in the house. They've lived there for over 20 years, raised 3 kids there. So they've lived in this house for a minute.
So
When this
sure the
happened.
kids experience all this as well.
No, like this happened with just them in the house.
Oh, okay.
Like their kids have already moved out at this point. They're grown.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
So like they've lived there 20 years by the time this happened.
So it happened after the kids were gone. That's crazy.
And you know, whenever I was first reading this, I'm like, he was on dialysis. Well, like his dialysis machine just started spraying.
But damn, covering the whole house.
But then I started reading it, and like reading listening to like some stuff that she said. It gets sprouted from the floor. The way she said when she said it in the interview, it was like the elevator opening in The Shining. So yeah, that's all of it for the Blood House of Atlanta, the Bleeding House of Atlanta, Bleeding House of Fountain Drive. Still unsolved today. 11/14.
Yeah. We go to trulyadventure.us/bloodhouse. You can read the whole thing.
Yeah, look into it. I think it's a supernatural thing, like a position or something.
Yeah.
Maybe Johnny Depp got sucked through a bed again. I don't know.
Heck yeah. Is that
It's a nightmare reference.
what is it?
Hey, it's that. If it wasn't for Wes Craven's daughter, there would be no Johnny Depp. So, yeah, that's it. So, y'all stay safe.
Yep.
Check out William Wish. Check out Halloween Hollow. Check out everybody who supports us.
Yeah.
Any ideas? Leave us a comment. Give us a like, share.
Check out tnhorror.com. See y'all.
Bye.